In today's podcast episode, I'm sharing with you 4 ways that you can confidently hire an architect to finally design you a healthy home. And if you're new here, I'm Christine, licensed general contractor here in Southern California and holistic construction consultant for projects all over the US, finally building right. So when hiring an architect, that's typically your very first step after having land that you can build on. And when you're hiring an architect, typically you start with their portfolio, or you go to their website and you take a look at the homes that they've designed. And that is a great first step, but that's not what's going to lead to actually getting on the same page about designing you a healthy home. And more architects tend to stay in their lane aesthetically. And so it is right that you start with taking a look at their website. Maybe you're talking to other people who have built in the area that you really like the aesthetic of their home, because most architects are either going to fall in the lane of modern design, or they're going to be more traditional designs and those are just completely different. So starting with the aesthetic, nothing wrong there, but then you quickly want to get into the questions. So after coming across a couple of architects that might be viable in the aesthetic that they share, next is you want to do a bit of homework on your end. And you really want to be going to these architects with at least some sort of programming, is what it's often referred to as. So things that are important to you. Maybe it's even just square footage, bedroom, bathroom count. But within that, if you are expecting a high performance, robust, watertight home, you need to be detailing in there what that means for you as well. And I share with clients that if you are willing to, I would share with the architect what your previous experience with mold or water damage or building defects. What was your past experience? What do you not like about your current home? Share a bit about maybe a health journey that you've been on, or maybe some of your children have become sick because of defects in your previous home. Share with them as much as you are willing to, because it will only help them in their design of your home. So doing some homework with listing out the basics of how many levels, will it have a basement, possibly what type of foundation you desire, as well as previous health obstacles or challenges in your current or previous homes, and also including in there what a healthy home means to you, because it's not going to mean the same thing to your architect and to the builder and anyone else on your team. So if you can even create a 1 to 2 sentence of what you mean by creating a healthy home. So that could be like, I want to build a healthy home that is going to not have high VOCs or formaldehyde in the interior air. I want to have a home that's going to be really airtight so that we're able to control the indoor humidity around 50%, which is a good target. And I want to not live in my home in fear of water damage ever again. That could be a good 2 to 3 sentence of what a healthy home means to you. You might have other particulars, as some of our clients do, whether that's around eliminating all fiberglass. We had a client who had a lung condition and their doctor advised them they can use 0 fiberglass on the insulation. They also couldn't have any fiberglass insulation around their ductwork. And there were a couple other contributing factors that would impact their lungs. And so they had a very specific subset of requirements, even in that architectural designing stage. So once you've gone through step 1, doing some homework of detailing out your preferences along with your health goals for the home, then that's when you move to step 2. And step 2 is where you can start to ask a bit more particular questions. So this is probably where you're having your first or your second meeting with the architect to see if you all are aligning. And this is where you can start to see if they are on the same page as you. They may not have any prior experience in building a healthy home, but that's okay in some cases, as long as they have the awareness, the ability to do what you are asking, and willing to learn. And most architects that we work with, I wouldn't say are in this elite category of high performance, passive home architects. Some are, but most are just really good architects that want to do good work and are so receptive to what the client is asking for. They just need support. they are just totally unfamiliar with any other type of building enclosure strategies other than what's typically done in their region. So having the conversation around, do they have any familiarity of building or designing healthy homes in the past, and asking about how receptive they are to doing things different than what their standard plans would show. Another question I like to often ask is, what is their pool of consultants? So most architects are going to have a relationship with a civil engineer or a soils engineer, a structural engineer, all of these types of engineers and consultants that are needed to actually complete a set of plans that can be submitted for permits. They typically have relationships and referrals to those types of engineers and consultants. But I like to ask additional questions about, do they have any relationships with a waterproofing consultant? Do they have any relationships with a mechanical or HVAC engineer that can actually calculate and design the mechanical system? So get an understanding of what their relationships are with those that are in your immediate area, because you're going to need a really robust team to build you a robust home. And that's all done through relationships. Most of the time, we come across architects who don't have relationships with waterproofing consultants or mechanical engineers because it's not very common in residential construction. It should be, but it's not yet. Usually waterproofing consultants are on commercial projects, and I hear it all the time that mechanical design is not typical for residential, although it's a code requirement, and it very much should be a requirement for residential construction. And so when you're asking the questions about who they have at their disposal to bring into the team, that lets you know where you need to fill in the gaps. Do they have a relationship with a holistic consultant that understands indoor air quality and enclosure details? Do they have a relationship with any of these other people that are going to be needed to walk through the strategy of building the type of home and enclosure that you are expecting? So this should feel like a dialogue, probably the first or second time that you're meeting with the architect, but don't skip this stage and don't feel like you are being a burden or you're asking too many questions or you are bombarding them. This is a very important selection when hiring an architect because they are responsible for memorializing your expectations. So if you are expecting something in your project, they are the ones that are going to get it in a 2D or 3D form so that those plans are referred to during construction. So ask these questions now. During that conversation, or maybe a subsequent conversation, is also where you should be getting a bit more information onto the level of plans that they are providing. So this brings me to step 3, where you should be receiving samples of what their work looks like. So you already know what their aesthetic looks like. You've provided them with a bit of homework and already had this initial conversation. Now step 3 is where you are seemingly deciding to take the next step with this architect. So you should be getting a proposal about what their fees are, which is typically a percentage of the build cost. I've seen a wide range in what architectural fees include. I would say generally I see somewhere between like 5 to 15% of the build cost. That is a very wide range, and it's going to be a significant number depending on the size of the project. But in step 3, that's where you should be getting information about their fees. You should also be receiving a sample of their construction document set. So in your architectural process, you're going to go through a schematic design. That's where you're getting just spatial layout done. And then you get into design development. That is where things start to come together. You start to do exterior elevations and architectural details, and all of the decisions are starting to layer on top of each other, lighting plans and mechanical plans. Then the final package is referred to as a construction document set. That is what's used to build the home. That's what's referred to by the contractor in the field. In step 3 of this process, you need to be getting a cost from the architect, as well as an example of what their deliverables look like. Is it a floor plan and an elevation and maybe a lighting plan, and it's just a submittal that satisfies the building permit requirements, because those requirements are much lighter than what's actually used for construction. So you really want to get clear on what you are getting and also what you are not getting. So are you responsible for hiring a mechanical engineer? Are you responsible for hiring the landscape architect? And like, who else is needed to bring into this team so you have a full set of plans so that you can begin construction confidently? So once you go through the proposal process and then you receive a sample of their construction documents, then that's where you can really see what you can expect from this architect. It might be a really dialed in set of plans and you get really excited because there's a high level of detail. They might even include specifications within those documents, or you might be very underwhelmed and the architect could be charging you 12% of the build cost and giving you a permitted set of plans. I've seen some wild things from architects. But step 3 is where you do your vetting and your due diligence of like, is this the right architect for you? Depending on the level of detail that you're expecting. So I'll give you an example of an architect that was brought into a project. Sometimes we are joyfully brought into a project before anyone is hired. No architect, no builder, and we assemble the entire team and we do all of the vetting process alongside you. In some instances, the architect and the builder is already selected. No problem with that. We can work with anybody. And this particular project already had the architect and already had the builder. So as we do, we began collaborating with the architect on the building enclosure. Well, what was revealed is that this architect that was hired was not an architect, was not even a drafter. It was a designer. It was a designer who had an in-house drafter. And a drafter is somebody who has the capability to draw the plans, but not the skill set of an architect. And so the homeowner for this project that was in Tennessee really struggled. Like, their project couldn't continue to move forward because who they had hired didn't have the skill set to actually put together a full construction document set. And the reason was that the architect, drafter, designer in reality actually shared that, well, within our region, we don't typically do construction document sets. We just let the builder determine that in the field. And that is not at all what that homeowner was expecting. So there was some gaps revealed during that process, and a new architect needed to come in to bring the plans to a level of detail that the owner was expecting. But it was more costly and it wasted more time with that original drafter. So just get really clear on who you're hiring and what their skill set is. Best way to do that is, just like I mentioned, getting an example set of their deliverables. So that's step 3. Step 4, if you could only pick one of these, it would be step 4. And step 4 is about having full clarity on what their involvement is during construction. So if you're hiring an architect, you need to know the level of involvement that they will have in your project during construction. Most architects are not familiar with having any involvement during construction. That's not the best way to have a successful project. And most architects have the willingness and ability to provide this service. So during your architectural and planning stage, once that construction document set is completed, then you move into construction. That should not just be a handoff to the contractor and then the contractor implements what's on the plans. That is where things just fall apart. The architect should also be able to provide the service of project admin or construction admin. So this is where the architect is done with the planning side and the drawings, and they are stepping into the role of being on site during the actual build. This is so important because things get lost in translation. Sometimes the contractor might be unfamiliar with a detail on the plans. The contractor should be able to have ongoing constant communication with the architect, but more importantly, the architect should be on site during your project. They don't have to be there the entire process, like all the way through painting. But the most critical time for an architect to be involved in your project after the plans are completed is during the foundation. So they will often come out take a look at if you're doing a slab foundation or a basement. They will often come out and take a look at how everything is being detailed before anything's poured. The architect often comes out during the exterior wall as assembly as well, and especially during windows. So the most important time for the architect to be involved during construction is during the enclosure of the project. So your foundation, exterior walls, windows, your roof, they should be there on site and meeting with the contractor to talk about how it's going to be detailed, just as it's shown on the plans. And if anything is deviating from it, or they needed to do a different detail, or there was a different material, these should all be ongoing conversations to make sure that what you have worked so hard to communicate to the architect is actually on the plans and then is actually what's being built. So ask about the role of the architect being involved in project admin or construction admin. This is typically a separate fee. So in your fee for construction documents and design development, there's typically an option sometimes or an add-on to have the architect available for project admin. And it's typically based on number of site visits. So like how often are they going out to the project? I would say they're typically coming out to the project less than 10 times throughout the duration of the build. And if you are working on a larger scale project where there is a lot of selections and moving parts and pieces, sometimes the architect will also remain on the project for any questions that come up. And this is usually done through an RFI, which is a request for information. So the contractor would submit a request for information or clarity to the architect saying, the plans show this, I'm not quite sure what this flashing detail is and how it's supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And this is how things get clarified during construction. Without having any of this project admin during the build, the contractor just takes the liberty of this is what's on the plans, well, I'm gonna slightly use something different. So there should be this ongoing communication between yourself as the homeowner, the architect, and the contractor throughout the build. The architect should have the ability to go out to the project to do verification, or they're sometimes referred to as observations in the field. And this is how things get streamlined and take the burden off of you, feeling like you have to spot the red flags or hover over the contractor to make sure that they're doing what's on the plans. That's really not the best use of your time. And that's exactly why you are hiring this architect to begin with. So 4 steps to hiring a really good architect, and also a great way for you to determine if there are gaps or if there's just not an alignment in who you're hiring. And if you wanted to go even deeper into questions you can be asking your architect, I have a full architect interview checklist. And if you want this full checklist, just click the link below, head over to my Instagram and DM me the word interview, and I'll send it right over to you, and you can start to use that to confidently be interviewing and vetting your architect all on your own. I hope this episode was helpful for you. I post every week here. And if you are wanting to start the process of selecting an architect in this interview process, head to the link below. We have a full directory where you can search contractors, architects, and independent home inspectors nationwide. So click the link below. We have the Holistic Homes directory where you can search it completely free. And I post a new podcast here on YouTube every single week. So I'll see you on the next episode.